the work that we have to do on our recovery for OCD is difficult. It's really, really difficult. Exposure is difficult. Exposure therapy, exposure and response prevention, or exposure and ritual prevention, which is the gold standard treatment alongside cognitive treatment, working on beliefs for OCD. Exposure is quite grueling. You know, people do this for phobias. They may do sort of varying levels for trauma as well. I'm not quite sure about that, to be honest. But, you know, it's grueling. It forces you to face your fears, the things that you're absolutely terrified of. No matter how irrational or illogical you may be aware that it is, the alarm system in your brain is sounding and you're feeling physical anxiety. So, you know, you've got these are things that to you are terrifying, and exposure and response prevention it asks you to come face to face with sort of various things that will trigger obsessions that remind you of your fear and worst case scenario. So that's really difficult. Now, along with that, there's also the time consuming aspect of the cognitive work as well. You know, if you're spending a certain amount of time a day working on your cognitive work, plus juggling a busy life outside of your recovery, you know, maybe you have children, you know, maybe you have a very demanding job, or maybe you are also a carer, or maybe you also have physical disabilities or something like that. Or maybe, you know, maybe you're a student and you're studying, or whatever it might be, that takes this, you know, work on your recovery. If you're prioritizing it, it can sometimes, you know, you need to schedule in time to work on it away from the rest of your life. Now, if you're doing these things, you know, you're spending time working on your recovery and you're doing exposures which are very, very difficult and going through a phase of not making as much progress for whatever reason that might be, you can start to feel really, really demotivated and really frustrated and just think, I'm not going to do it. And then you might find that even thinking about, you know, doing the work for recovery causes this feeling of frustration, and you think you can't face it. Now, this is where the whole frustration tolerance part of OCD recovery comes in. So in Albert Ellis's book, Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, Yes Anything, he talks about, as well as our irrational beliefs and acceptance, he talks about our frustration tolerance, and that it can be very helpful in life for us to work on building our frustration tolerance. Now, there is actually another video on this channel about frustration tolerance that you can also check out for more information about it. But just to give a brief explanation, now I don't have anything in front of me, so bear with me. So a frustration tolerance basically is our ability to sit with the feelings of frustration without kind of giving up on the task that we're working on. So it can also be our beliefs about the feeling of frustration. You know, I can't stand feeling that frustrated, etc. So what we want to do is be able to work on our ability to sit with the feelings of frustration. So work on our recovery, even though we're feeling frustrated, even though we're having thoughts saying, what's the point? There's no point. I'm not getting any better, wasting my time. You know, so what? So what? You still want, you know, the other option to not working on your recovery is giving up. And if you're giving up, you know, then you might be getting worse, because OCD can insidiously creep into anything, and you could unknowingly fall back into doing compulsions that you had worked very hard to cut out. So this is where, like, I wanted to talk about frustration tolerance. If you are going through a period where you're not making as much progress, keep working on your recovery whilst feeling frustrated. I promise you, you'll be able to use these skills. If you've increased your frustration tolerance, your ability to do what you want to do, regardless of how frustrated you might feel, your brain will start to learn that the feelings of frustration and the thoughts that may come with it are irrelevant, and so there's less reason to be kind of sending these signals. Whereas if we react to those feelings and just give up, then, you know, our brain thinks, okay, yeah, that person doesn't like this, you know, this is helpful because the person's done what I've told them to do. You know, it's being at the mercy of our thoughts and feelings again, isn't it? Like with different parts of OCD. So it's the frustration tolerance bit that I think is very relevant here when you go through feelings of not making as much progress. So just be mindful of that when you're feeling frustrated, you're having thoughts, angry thoughts about, oh, I can't do this, I want to give up. And if you're sort of going to work on your recovery and then it seems to, trigger these things, sit with it. View it as another exposure and don't respond to it by giving up. Keep going.